Marcus had spent the better part of 6 months searching for a place to call his own before he finally found the house on the estate, a modest two-story row house in one of Bangkok's outer districts that had sat empty long enough for the price to drop well below market value. He was 34 years old, working a steady job in construction project management, and with Lily 4 months pregnant, the pressure to secure a home had been building in the back of his mind like water behind a dam. When Sandra, the property agent, first sent him the listing, he almost dismissed it. The photographs showed a house that looked clean enough on the surface but carried that particular stillness that only comes with prolonged vacancy, rooms too quiet, shadows pooling in corners that should have been bright, a small yard at the back where the grass had grown tall and gone to seed. But the price was right, and in a city where real estate moved fast and young couples with a baby on the way had to make hard decisions, Marcus told himself that every house has its history and what mattered most was the future. He signed the paperwork on a Thursday, handed over the transfer documents, and by the following Tuesday, he had loaded a pickup truck with his clothes, a few pieces of furniture, and his cooking equipment, and driven out to the estate himself. He wanted to get settled before Lily came on Saturday. He wanted the house to feel like home before she walked through the door for the first time, or at least as close to home as he could manage in 4 days. The estate was quiet when he arrived in the early afternoon, a grid of identical row houses stretching in neat rows along narrow paved lanes, most of them occupied by families who worked in the city and returned each evening to cook dinner and let the kids run between the houses till dark. Marcus's house sat near the end of one of those lanes, with a neighboring property directly to its right that appeared from the outside to be unoccupied. The shutters on the upper windows of that house were drawn. There was no car in the small parking space out front. No lights came on when evening fell. Marcus noted all of this in the vague, half-attentive way that people notice things they do not yet have reason to care about. And then he went inside and got to work unpacking. He spent Tuesday evening arranging the bedroom, setting up the kitchen, cleaning out the refrigerator, and making enough of a dent in the boxes that the house began to feel livable rather than like a storage unit. He slept reasonably well that first night, woke before 6, and stood in the small yard drinking coffee while the neighborhood came to life around him. Children being walked to school, motorcycles heading out toward the main road, a woman 2 houses down hanging laundry from an upper balcony. The air smelled of rain and motor oil and something faintly sweet that he could not identify, and he stood there for a while thinking about the nursery he would set up in the second bedroom, the crib he had already ordered, the small mobile of wooden stars that Lily had chosen from a shop near her mother's house. He thought about the life they were building and the house they were building it in, and he felt, for a brief and uncomplicated moment, like a man who had made the right choice. It was on Wednesday, his second day in the house, that he first saw the figure next door. He had stepped into the yard after lunch to take a phone call, and as he turned toward the neighboring property, he saw a man sitting on the ground near the wall that separated the 2 yards, wearing what looked like a uniform shirt, the kind with a company logo on the chest, and eating what appeared to be a convenience store meal set out on a piece of plastic wrap. The man was sitting very still in the way that people sit when they are not thinking about their bodies at all, wholly absorbed in whatever they are looking at, and Marcus had the sudden, unpleasant sense that whatever the man was looking at was him. He held the phone to his ear and continued talking and tried not to make it obvious that he was watching the man from the corner of his eye, but when he turned to look directly at the neighboring yard, the man did not react, did not look away, did not acknowledge Marcus's attention in any way. He simply sat there in his uniform shirt with his food in his lap and looked at Marcus with an expression that Marcus could not quite read from that distance, but that did not feel, even from across the width of 2 yards, like a friendly one. Marcus finished his phone call and went back inside, telling himself the man was probably a worker from one of the nearby houses, someone who had ducked into the vacant lot next door to eat his lunch in the shade away from the midday sun, which was brutal that time of year. But when he went back out an hour later, the yard next door was empty. There was no man, no food containers, no evidence of anyone having been there at all except for a single plastic water bottle standing upright near the wall. and a small scattering of food wrappers arranged with an odd tidiness on the ground beside it, as though whoever had left them had taken some care in placing them, rather than simply dropping them where they stood. Marcus stood at the boundary of his yard and looked at those items for a long moment. He thought about going over to check, but the gate to the neighboring property was padlocked, and the wall between the yards was too high to see over comfortably. He went inside and made himself a cup of tea and spent the rest of the afternoon working from his laptop and trying not to think too hard about what he had or had not seen. That evening, he called Lily and told her the house was coming along nicely, that the neighborhood seemed calm and quiet, that he thought she would like it. He did not mention the man in the yard. There was nothing concrete to mention, he told himself. It was probably nothing at all. Thursday passed quietly, and Marcus occupied himself with hanging curtains and assembling a bookshelf and making a list of repairs the house needed, and for a full 24 hours he did not think about the neighboring property or the figure he had seen or the tidy arrangement of food wrappers near the wall. On Friday, Leo came by. Leo was a junior worker Marcus sometimes brought along on site visits, a cheerful and dependable young man in his mid-20s who had offered to help with the move and come out to the estate to assist with carrying in the last of the furniture from a storage unit Marcus had rented nearby. They spent most of the morning moving things in, stopping around noon for lunch at a noodle shop on the main road where they talked about work and complained about a project manager at one of the client sites who had a habit of changing specifications at the last minute, and it was when they came back in the early afternoon and pulled the truck up in front of the house that Leo mentioned, with the careful casualness of someone who is not quite sure how to say something, that he had noticed the house next door. Marcus asked him, what about it? Leo said that when they had pulled up that morning, before Marcus had come around to the front of the vehicle, Leo had been standing on the pavement looking toward the house, and he had seen a figure at the upper window of the neighboring property, standing very still behind the glass, watching. Marcus asked him to describe what he had seen. Leo said it was a man in a uniform shirt, standing at the window with his hands at his sides, very straight, not moving at all, just watching as the truck pulled up. And then Marcus had come around the vehicle and said something to Leo, and Leo had looked away for a moment, and when he looked back at the window, the figure was gone. Leo said he had not mentioned it earlier because he thought he had probably imagined it, that the light was strange that morning and he was tired from the drive out from the city, but something about the stillness of the figure, the absolute rigidity of it, had stayed with him all day, and he thought Marcus should know. Marcus thanked him and said he had probably seen someone from the property management company doing an inspection of the vacant house. Leo nodded, but he did not look convinced, and he left earlier than he had planned, and Marcus stood in his newly furnished living room listening to the sound of Leo's truck pulling away down the lane, and felt for the first time since signing the papers a small and persistent unease settle somewhere behind his sternum that he could not quite shake loose, no matter how many rational explanations he offered himself. He called Sandra that evening. She was the agent who had handled his purchase, a professional woman in her 40s who had been in real estate long enough to know that buyers sometimes developed anxieties after moving in, and that the best approach was to be calm and practical and answer questions directly without feeding unnecessary worry. Marcus asked her what she knew about the house next door. Sandra said she did not have detailed information about that particular property, but that she knew the estate management company kept records of all the units, and she could reach out to the estate manager, a man named Edwin, who had been with the development for years, if Marcus had a specific concern. Marcus said he just wanted to know if the house was occupied or if there was some kind of caretaker or maintenance person who might be going in and out. Sandra said she would find out and get back to him. She called him back the following morning, Saturday, the day Lily was coming, and what she told him then was the beginning of everything unraveling.